Good evening, everyone. Before we start the show, there are some terms you need to know. First, the term Tejano or Tejana is Spanish for Texan. The term is used to describe someone who is a Texan of Mexican descent. Second, the Texas Rangers. They were a police force meant to protect the Anglo-Texan economic and political elites who would shoot first and ask questions later. They, in particular, did not like Mexicans, especially those who fit the stereotype of a poor, uneducated Spanish-speaking immigrant, because then they were seen as criminals or aliens. Lastly, the Mexican Revolutionary War. The Mexican Revolution took place from 1910 to 1920. At that time, Mexico was ruled by a dictator named Porfirio Diaz Mori, and everyone hated him. So there was a call to arms to overthrow him, and that was the cause of the war. The people of Mexico won this war and elected a president that would pass a constitution that included political and economic and social rights for everyone. Well, mostly, but that's a different story. Now that you are informed, let the show begin. Hola, my name is Jovita Idar. I was born September 7th, 1985. Some of you may know my name, but most of you do not. My story is one of many left out of the history books. So here I am today to tell it to you. So you can know who I am and how I made an impact in my community as a Tejana in Laredo, Texas. At a young age, I learned to harness and focus my energies and talents. I have my brother and fathers to thank for that. My father taught my siblings and I so much about the world. We were educated with books, music, and the Methodist Church. My father, Nicasio Idar, and my mother, Jovita, worked within their community to help out others. My father taught me the importance of helping fellow Mexicans who didn't have what we had, and that instead of listening to others tell us who we should be and what we should do, we should form our own opinions about who we are. His knowledge of the mistreatment of Mexicans led him to his own activism of spreading knowledge through his newspaper, La Crónica. He believes that the underprivileged masses should be educated, elevated, and redeemed through a political culture grounded in an ethic of mutuality. And that's how he raised his children, as equals. He encouraged me not only to develop my mind, but to use my voice to lift up others. My mother always supported me with constant love and appreciation. As a result of their encouragement and influence, I decided to go into teaching. The first day of school as a new teacher was incredibly nerve-wracking. I was so nervous, but nothing could have prepared me for what I discovered. The children didn't have paper, books, or pencils. Los niños no tenían papel, libros, o lápices. The classroom was an abandoned building with no desks and dirt floors. Aula era un edificio abandonado sin escritorios y con pisos de tierra. There were no chalkboard and no air conditioning. These conditions were horrific. No había pizarra ni aire acondicionado. Esas condiciones eran horribles. The children came to learn, and yet had none of the resources to do so. Los niños vinieron a aprender y sin embargo no tenían los recursos para hacerlo. This isn't right. Esto no está bien. They deserve better. Ellos merecen algo mejor. Something needs to be done. Hay que hacer algo. When I asked for resources, cuando pedí recursos, I was denied because the politicians didn't think Mexican brown children needed books. Me los negaron porque los políticos no creen que los niños mexicanos de color necesitarán libros. Because apparently all we are good for is farm work and manual labor and can achieve nothing else. Porque aparentemente solo sirvemos para el trabajo agrícola y el trabajo manual y no podemos lograr nada más. Something needs to be done. Hay que hacer algo. Something needs to change. Hay que cambiar algo. We are more than this. Somos más que esto. They are more than this. Ellos son más que esto. Someone needs to step up. Alguien tiene que dar un paso adelante. And I guess it's going to be me. Y supongo que seré yo. So I went to work for my dad. Working with my older brothers was no problem. But writing pieces under my own name became an issue because men disagreed with a woman writing in newspapers. See, most people wouldn't be so trusting if the newspaper was written articles by women. This time period is all about the men. Unless you are cooking in the kitchen or giving birth to many children, as a woman, you are considered useless, unnatural, or abnormal. Luckily, I had an outlet for my writing. My family's newspaper, La Crónica. I wrote about everything that impacted my community in Laredo and the lives of my fellow Mexican Tejanos, including but not limited to las mujeres, the women. I was writing to call out to the Mexican women, telling them they had a voice and that they had to use it to not just fight for their rights, but for their children's rights as well. I called for parents to take responsibility for their children's education. When you educate a woman, you educate a family. I knew the drive to assimilate Mexican school children in the U.S.-based schools deprived youngsters of their linguistic and cultural heritage. I knew that learning English made life in the United States easier and certainly should be encouraged since Mexican Tejanos would need to use the language to defend their rights. I had to write under multiple pseudonyms such as Ave Negra, which means black bird, and Estrella, which is a reference to the Greek goddess of justice. I was writing about every injustice in our system. As I wrote in my article, we should work. The modern woman does not spend her days lounging in a comfortable chair. This not even the rich woman does, since those flattered by fortune also dedicate themselves to the practice of generosity or other philanthropic work, or to the organization of charitable or recreational clubs. What is desirable is to do something useful for yourself or for your fellow man. The working class woman, recognizing her rights, raises her head with pride and confronts the struggle. Her period of degradation has passed. She is no longer the slave sold for a few coins, no longer the servant. She is equal to man, his companion. He is her natural protector and not her master and lord. Women and men should be treated as equal, and yet they were seen equally undesirable by the Anglo-Mexicans. Lynchings were happening left and right. More and more often, the Texas Rangers killed the Mexican Americans just because they felt like it or felt that they had been wronged by them. I had felt like my pen was on fire because of how much it infuriated me this was happening and nothing was being done about it. After the lynching of Antonio Gomez, a 14-year-old Mexican-American boy in Thorndale, Texas, I couldn't handle it anymore. I went around my comunidad talking to people door to door, calling them to action through my printed words. Article after article, I called to my people. My father's newspaper, La Crónica, published a Mexican invitation to women from both Laredo, Texas, and Nuevo Laredo, Mexico. This is what appeared on the page. El Congreso Mexicanista se honra en invitar respetuosamente a las bellas mujeres de estas cuidadas hermanas a sus reuniones con la seguridad de que siempre encontrarán en ellas algo noble y grande a aprender y no encontrarán en ellas y más servil acto o trabajo que pueda herir su susceptibilidad. The Mexican Congress is honored to respectfully invite the beautiful women of these sister cities to their meetings, with the assurance that you will always find in them something noble and great to learn, and you will not find in them the most servile act or work that could hurt your sensibilities. This invitation was crucial to the movement because we were trying our best to put both women and men to the cause. I met with community leaders and we set a date to meet. The day was September 14th, 1911. My family and I gathered our community of Mexican American men and women from both sides of the border to discuss the issues of our lack of educational, economical, and social resources and what we could do about it. We were called El Primer Congreso Mexicanista, or the First Mexican Congress. The Congress was a convention that lasted multiple days. After my father's introductory speech, the convention elected board members, including my family members and myself. Then the Congress started with multiple speeches and workshops. We had even had children come some days to recite poems and sing songs. Our community came together, men and women, todo por la raza y para la raza, all by the Mexican people and for the Mexican people, to give support and give notice to what our community was suffering through. We had multiple female speakers that all spoke to the women power women have. In the home, in the school, in politics, and even our own autonomy. So we created our own group, La Liga Femenil Mexicanista. The League of Mexican Women came together. As president, my goal was to help lift up others in any way I could. We worked to provide aid to our community by gaining funds through charity work. Not only were we focused on education, since most of the members were educators, but there was also the problem of poverty. We were able to put together our own school to teach the poorest of kids and provide them with school supplies and books. Our organization was becoming a beacon for change. We advocated for our educated community, any resource we could provide to increase our standing as Mexicans to be seen as equals. Our goals were to increase the education of girls and women, fight against the segregation of school-aged children, and fight for the resources we are entitled to as Americans. After the convention ended, I was set with everything I needed to do for the Mexican American Women's League. I founded El Estudiante, the student, a publication that provided strategies for Tejana teachers to implement bilingual education, formulate their own lesson plans, and push back against the growing influence of Anglo-American culture in Mexican American schools. Then the war started. This was the Mexican Revolution. My closest friend, Leonor Villegas de Magnon, wanted to help nurse soldiers wounded in the war. The plan was to help smuggle soldiers into Laredo to get them the help they needed. I was nervous, but when she convinced 4 other women to go with us, I wasn't nervous anymore. Our effort led her to starting La Cruz Blanca, so we could recruit more women to help and serve in the war as nurses. She soon threw all of her financial resources into launching it as an organization. Today, we know it as the Red Cross. After the war, I went back into journalism, writing for multiple newspapers, including El Progreso. I used the power and privilege of my pen to continue writing about the mistreatment of Mexicans in Laredo and how we needed to fight back, doing what we can. In 1914, my peer Manuel Garcia Vigil, working at El Progreso, wrote a scathing article criticizing President Wilson about intervening in the Mexican Revolution, specifically the military intervention in Veracruz. This caused rage across Laredo, especially amongst the Texas Rangers. After the article came out, they came the next morning to my office at El Progreso. The Texas Rangers came to confront the author of the article, and while my peer Manuel and I shared the bylines, they thought he was him. Probably because he was a man, and men were held to a higher responsibility than women. All of a sudden, we can hear yelling and the sounds of horses' hooves. I went outside, and they said they were going to tear down our newspaper shop. They said, "Please, step aside." And I said, "No, I am standing here, and you cannot come in because it's against the law." They stood there, looking at me. I was not going to give in. Despite my fear of what may happen to me, to my brothers, to my family, they had beat and imprisoned Manuel Garcia Vigil and tried to have him lynched. I didn't want to imagine the repercussions, but soon they left. I could tell they were angry and they couldn't come into the shop. But I was proud. I stood my ground. Little did I know they were going to come back the next day and destroy everything. No one was there to protect it. As I was told, the scene was horrific. Según me dijeron, la escena era horrible. Everything was in pieces. Todo estaba en pedazos. Torn paper, papel roto, broken tables, windows and chairs, mesas, ventanas, y sillas quebradas. I was told they took hammers to our printing presses. Me dijeron que usaron martillos para destrozar nuestras imprentas. Everything was broken. Todo estaba quebrado. But our spirit wasn't. Pero nuestro espíritu no. After the destruction of the property, I went back to work for my father at La Crónica, where he soon passed away. My father, Nicasio Idar, died of an intestinal disorder in April 1914. My brothers and I took over La Crónica and continued to support the mission of the paper, whose tagline read, Trabajamos por el progreso y el desarrollo industrial, moral y intelectual de los habitantes mexicanos de Texas. We work for the progress and the industrial, moral, and intellectual development of the Mexican inhabitants of Texas. I did this for 2 years until in 1916 I started my own newspaper, Evolucion. But after I got married to my husband, Bartolo Juarez, I handed the operations of the paper over to my brother, Eduardo. In 1921, we moved to San Antonio. Definitely more forward-thinking there. We both joined the Democratic Party, and I continued to advocate for my fellow Mexicans through different types of activism. I held and worked multiple jobs to fulfill my determination of implementing change on how Mexican Americans were seen and treated. I became a precinct judge for the Democratic Party. During my years, someone like me to serve as an elected official was extremely rare. Not only am I a woman, but I am a radicalized Tejana Mexican woman. I served as an interpreter and translator for Spanish-speaking patients at the Robert B. Greene Memorial Hospital in San Antonio. I brushed up on my Italian by writing articles for La Voce della Patria, a San Antonio language newspaper. I continued serving my faith through attending La Trinidad Methodist Church. Within the church, I became president of the United Methodist Women's Group, and I co-edited El Heraldo Cristiano, the Christian Herald, a Spanish-speaking publication within the Methodist Church. All of these jobs include the most important facets of my life: family, education, church, politics, and community. I wanted everyone to have an education, but the type of education that mattered, where Mexicans are taught to thrive and succeed instead of being told they will never be good enough and should accept the scraps they were given. I, Jovita Idar Juarez, died on June 15, 1946, of a pulmonary hemorrhage caused by complications from tuberculosis. I was 60 years old. They buried me at San Jose Burial Park in San Antonio. Thank you for listening to my story today. Gracias por escuchar mi historia hoy. There are a few conocimientos I hope you take away from my story, my life, my journey. Hay algunos conocimientos que espero que aprendes de mi historia, de mi vida, mi viaje. When you see inequality in our communities, it is imperative you use whatever power and privilege you have to help others. It is unjust for people to be discriminated against because of circumstances out of their control and to want a better life for themselves and their families. Cuando ves la desigualdad en nuestras comunidades, es imperativo que uses cualquier poder y privilegio que tengas para ayudar a los demás. Es injusto que la gente sea discriminada por circunstancias fuera de su control y que quiera una vida mejor para ellos y sus familias. We need to be strong and courageous against those who use power to dictate the mistreatment of others and dismiss the lives of minorities by calling them criminals. Tenemos que ser fuertes, valientes contra quienes utilizan el poder para dictar el maltrato y los demás, menospreciar la vida de las minorías, llamándolas criminales. I want you to push the boundaries. I am an example of a woman who, according to the laws of Juan, shouldn't exist. A loud, opinionated, educated, informed, bilingual, childless, strong, brown, Tejana woman. I rallied my community together to fight against Mexican oppression in education and livelihood. Every day, Mexicans were killed and treated like trash because they were poor, brown, an immigrant, uneducated, or didn't speak English. I worked hard to change the discrimination Mexican Americans faced. The classroom that Mexican American children had were abhorrent, so as acting president of the Female Mexican Congress, our goal was to give the children books and resources to thrive instead of having nothing at all. Where do you see the mistreatment of others? Stand up for them. They need help. Everyone deserves to be treated as human and not lesser than. My life story consists of advocating for the equality of women, children, and Mexicans within Laredo, Texas society. Step outside. Take notice of active discrimination. Stand against it by using your influence and skills to connect with your community to fix the problem. We need to educate others to treat people with dignity because everyone is human, no matter how different they are from you. Always help others and fight against injustices. Thank you. Gracias.